Hey everybody, Pastor Adam here from First Covenant Church, and with me is,
Good afternoon. Nope,
you know,
not afternoon. It's the morning right now. I'm losing track of time, Adam. I'm Pastor Bob from First Presbyterian Church, and I don't know what day it is or what time it is anymore.
we don't
So,
know what date. Everything's off. Everything's
yeah.
weird. Yep. All right. This is part of our Unafraid series. So we're going to watch the video today, Unafraid number 2, and we'll kind of pause and interact like we did last time. Before we did that, we wanted to just talk a little bit about our presence as Christians on social media and how we're listening to different kinds of voices. So I'll let Bob start and then I'll pick up from there.
Yeah, so, I think sometimes some of us could have avoided social media a lot before, but at this point, it's the main way that we're keeping in touch with one another. I mean, even this Zoom thing. One of the criticisms I hear of kids today is that they don't know how to communicate with people because of social media, which I think is really kind of funny. Um, uh, but now we're all entering into this world. We have to if we want to stay in touch with people. But one of the things that does happen is I think we lose kind of touch. When I go out in public, I sometimes try to look presentable. I try to present my best self. So I'll shower, maybe brush my hair,
Right.
brush my teeth, kind of get dressed up a little bit. I don't dress the same way around the house or outside of the house as I do around the house. Thank God. Because I want to present my best self. And sometimes on social media, because of the anonymity, because we're not seeing the other person, we sometimes are a little bit more willing, I guess, to present not our best selves. And so I think it's important for us right now to think about that and how we're presenting ourselves and who we are and how we might be presenting Christ in the world through our social media presence. So.
Nice. Yeah, totally agree. And then if we're primarily communicating through these ways, then be Christ-like here as well as anywhere else in your life, right? That's our call. Christ always with us. I have a little bit of a different take. Let's see, I'll share this with you all. I hope you can see this. This is, if you haven't seen charts like this before, that's fine, but here is a media bias rating. And in this time of lots of different kinds of information coming out and wondering what's true and what's not and what's opinionated and what's not, here's a helpful guide for you. You can see right down the center there with the big C, some of the news sources that are trying to be as objective as possible. And then you can see if you go to the left, obviously, these are going to be more of the liberal or left leaning, and then obviously to the right. I would just say to anybody who's listening to this, now is not the time to be feeding your political opinion. Now is the time to just be simply listening to as much truth as you can, because it could be life or death for us. And I'm not saying that to scare you, because we're about to talk about being unafraid, but I just think that as Christians, it's our responsibility to present truth, especially in crisis moments like this. So I'm gonna start the video. Let's see here, and we'll pause as we need to. There's the video. You ready, Pastor?
I'm ready and ready.
You're ready and ready.
I am ready and ready. It always starts with this lag.
You've got lag? I don't have lag. That's interesting.
Oh, okay.
It's great to join you again today. I'm so excited about the conversation we have a chance to have about fear, because fear is such a prevalent part of our lives. And it affects so much in our society. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is our fear as it relates to crime, as it relates to race, terrorism, and politics, some really big issues. And we're going to unpack that a bit. As I've studied fear, one of the things that becomes clear is we fear the things we don't know. We fear the people that we don't know. And there are folks always ready to make us afraid. I think about the news channels, right? 24-hour news. Well, nobody wants to turn on 24-hour news to watch a fireman rescue a cat. So what we've got to do is we've got to find the most salacious or the most violent or the most, fearful thing that's happened. And though it may be a 1 in 6 million chance it's going to happen, we're watching it, all of us together on the news, and that helps, create that fear. And I think about, I don't know which journalist said, if it bleeds, it leads. And if it bleeds, it reads. And so people are, we're drawn to read or to watch the things that are either frightening or unsettling. And then we begin to find in our hearts and our minds, really, that we become fearful of things that we really don't need to be fearful of. And when I think about this, we have this tendency to, catastrophize things, to think that things are, far worse than they are. And I think about that, say, when it comes to crime. So there's a whole lot of people who are afraid that, the world is more violent today. It's more crime-ridden. And I spent time researching, the facts. And what I found is that violent crime is actually down to its lowest level since 1964, the year I was born. Wow. But our assumption is that, violent crime is rampant. It's worse than it's ever been. And that leads us to think I need to have a way of protecting myself. I need to be afraid and suspicious of the other person. And it struck me, there was, as I was researching this book, that year there were 15,000 murders. That same year, 250,000 people, it was estimated, died in hospitals from mistakes that were made in the hospital. So you think about that. Which are people more terrified by? They're terrified that they might get killed if I need to do something because I might be, violently hurt, or are they terrified that if I go to the hospital, I might die from, a medical mistake? And nobody's afraid of that second scenario, but we're very afraid of, violent crime, which has actually gone down dramatically over the years.
Okay, so now we're terrified of going to the hospital.
Right, I was just thinking the same thing.
So it's a little dated, right? I mean, obviously they're not talking in the midst of a pandemic virus, but at the same time, his point is correct, and maybe it was pertinent that we were talking about social media and media bias ahead of this, because there is a way of presenting the truth and the facts that skews and hits that fear button in all of us, because of course that sells you. That's what allows you to click that clickbait ad if you're perusing the online or something like that, because that's where the money is. And so there's an investment in keeping us afraid and making us afraid. And then not only is there money in that, but if there's power in keeping a certain or labeling a certain group of people as we're supposed to be afraid of them, because then we become we can galvanize around that idea. And there's political power, or there's even spiritual power in that. It might not be a good power to use, but certainly it's there. It's always been there in human history, right?
And we all use it. I mean, that's the thing. It's not like we like to demonize those not like us or those who we disagree with, but we all use it or feed into it in our own ways. So yeah, and the church has fed into fear throughout its history from time to time. So, yeah.
Yeah. This is just funny. I was watching the video and they're all given that very Christian amen, where they're like, yeah. So we do it too, right? It's hilarious.
Yes.
Happy April Fool's Day, everyone.
Oh, by the way, I was thinking as he was talking about, the first thing he said was not wanting to watch a fireman rescue a cat.
Right.
It's like, well, I kind of would.
That's all I want to watch right now. It's just
dude from The Office. Is it John Krasinski? Is that his name?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So he started a new YouTube channel called Some Good News, and
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, and I watched it yesterday, and it was nice to hear some good news.
Yeah, Google Some Good News if you're listening to this, and just go watch it. It's wonderful.
Give you the feel goods.
And we're back.
Or I think of heart disease. For every person who dies of murder in the year, 40 people will die of heart disease, and yet we're not so terrified that we're exercising and and doing all the things we need to do to address that. And so getting the facts seems really important. And what I find interesting is, say as we think about the election season, we get 60-second commercials that are aimed at telling us why we shouldn't vote for the other person. It's not the, powerful, positive vision I have for what I'm going to do as a politician, but so often what we hear is the scary voice, the announcer in the scary voice telling us how bad things are going to be if somebody else is elected to office. And so I guess I'd like to have our conversation here revolve around this idea of fear of the other, fear of, how fear motivates us when it comes to politics or society, crime, even terrorism. Of course, the terrorist uses a megaphone by committing an act, that's broadcast over and over again on the television. So I'm wondering, how does fear affect us as a society? Where do you see that? What are your experiences of it?
Looking at the power of the media and the power of all this information that is available, it creates this fear in the community. And like, if we're speaking in my context, a lot of my community do not have a high degree of education or anything. Everything their main source of information is Facebook or is Twitter. And so that creates a little bit of an extra tension. This is, you not only have fear, but also you start to create a little bit of that resistance and maybe a way overprotective in having conversations that actually maybe be a healing experience.
News and the social media movement, I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know what's a fact and what's sensationalized or what's somebody's opinion on Twitter. It's their take on the news story, but I don't go read the official news story. I just read everybody's take on the news story. So then I realize, oh, wait a minute, what's the truth here? And I will feel my blood pressure rising. I mean, truly, there isn't any social media that I feel better after reading. There's no channel or outlet that helps me, that I actually come away from it going, wow, I'm really glad I checked that feed. And so I noticed it boiling the fear. And the only way for me to avoid that is try to stay out of it. And yet it's a news source.
Right. That's so interesting.
So Adam, just real quick, it's interesting as I was listening. So Kate, my wife, has the same problem when she goes on Facebook. I mean, and especially right now, Facebook is one of the ways that we're able to kind of check up and check in on one another. What's so frustrating about it for her and me is all of that kind of sensationalism or the reposting of the sensational story or the reposting of something, or I don't know, or the quick kind of hit comment that makes my anxiety rise up. And yet I want to check Facebook in some ways to see kind of who's out there. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. So like Kate has she's opted out in a way. She's not getting on Facebook. She's posting videos of her lambs to Twitter, and then that gets posted to Facebook, trying to, I think, offer in some ways her own some good news. But yeah, it just makes my anxiety rise when I'm on Facebook, which gets me to, and I don't really post on Facebook, but what are we offering to the world when we post on Facebook?
Well, Bob doesn't post on Facebook because he's afraid he's going to break it when he posts on it, right?
Yes, it's true. That is a true statement, Adam. Thank you for letting everybody know.
But I hear you. Like maybe the word is stewardship, because that doesn't kind of a churchy word, right? But we're good stewards of our Facebook and our social media presence and how we're engaging the comments section. Because it's, please don't read the comments section unless you're just going to there for entertainment, because it is going to make your blood pressure go up no matter what. There's going to be some crazy person on there who's just mouthing off. There's going to be lots of personal attacks. This is just not how we want to live in real life, but like you said earlier, it just seems like there's a little anonymity, and all of a sudden people can say whatever they want and be mean and cruel and stupid.
But even like there's times where people I'm friends with, I love, I agree with on a lot of things will post just like an article, and I know what they're doing. They're trying to offer information, but sometimes I don't know. It's like the information that even that article is offering isn't helpful. so it gets to where are we getting our information from, you know?
And how do we vet that, or
Right.
how do we discern? Because Facebook is trying to close down things that are just fake news, and other platforms. We're just using Facebook, but how do we actually know what's true and what's not
Right.
in this world?
Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
So
Okay, maybe this video will solve everything,
I'm sure, or this discussion, Adam.
or this discussion.
We live today in a time where people talk about fake news a lot, and the reality might be that there's actually, if it's not fake news, it's sensationalized
Right.
news or exaggerated news or one-sided news on both the left and the right.
Right.
And if all you get is your information from one source or from one group of sources that lean in the same direction,
Right.
it's hard to know, am I getting the fair and unbiased? And everybody claims they're fair and unbiased. Fox News claims they're fair and unbiased, and so does NPR, and so does MSNBC, and yet somehow they're reporting the news somewhat differently. And so where have you seen, Marie, where have you seen this issue of fear creating, addressing our society or changing our society, or, how do you experience that?
I think we bring into the situation with social media our social location in life. We bring in components of the quadrilateral. We bring in our life experience. We bring in our traditions and how we interpret what we read through Twitter and what we read through Facebook. And that sometimes will be false events or interpreting in a way that it wasn't meant to be, or presented it on Facebook in a way that it's not meant to be. Yes, and so then that fear is put into the community of what your social location interprets it as, whereas mine interprets it a different way.
Yeah, I found.
Whoa, that was good.
Yeah.
So if the thing that made both of our eyebrows go up, I was watching your screen too, was like, we bring our social location to this platform, right? Who we are. And that sparks in me like this idea of, it's really hard to communicate tone of voice and body language on a social platform like this. Even right now, I'm obviously talking with my hands, and I can see you. Our eyebrows are going up. There's so much other communication that's happening in a face-to-face, even a video, and a lot of that is cultural. Like, you've learned it from how you grew up, or the family you came from, or the friends that you hang out with. You pick up language, you pick up mannerisms, all that kind of stuff, and that just does not get translated into Facebook or any social media platform.
Right.
And so people can react, and they think that you're being mean when you're just being you or normal, and then things spiral out of control too easily.
For those of you who are wondering what she meant by the quadrilateral.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I needed to look it up. It's a Methodist thing. So
We love the Methodists. So
they're great, but I just want you who aren't Methodist out there to know what that is. The quadrilateral is how we come to understand our faith. And we come to understand our faith through scripture, through reason, through our lives or our experiences, which is that social location, and then through the traditions that we grow up with. So, so our Christian traditions, how we worship, those types of things, how we pray. So that's the quadrilateral that she's talking about. And the one that she was focusing on most was on social location or our experience in our lives. And each of us, like Adam was saying, kind of come into the world and have experienced the world in different ways. So how we even interpret Facebook or interpret news or interpret how we communicate with one another is different from one another. We don't all have or have the same shared experience. So.
And we shouldn't be surprised by this, because for 500 years or so, right, in the church anyway, we've been fighting each other over interpretations of the Bible, right?
Yeah, but ours is right. So
exactly. No, ours is right. Yeah, that's why we're doing this. We're going to put down those Presbyterians. Yeah,
Adam is going to show you why the evangelical covenant is so much better.
Many of those, I mean, and I think, thank God, many of those denominational distinctions, most people don't even know what they are anymore. And we've gone into political distinctions and cultural distinctions instead. But I think those can go away. Those need to be dispersed is the right word I'm looking for, as well, because we have much more in common than we do, obviously. Not in common. All right. Why does it take so many buttons? Just go.
One of my friends in Kansas City, Emmanuel.
You're going to break it, dude.
African-American pastor. And we grew up, he's a little younger than I am, but grew up in the same, city. I grew up as a child in I don't think there was a person of color in my elementary school. And so my understanding, I was taught that there was a certain street in Kansas City you weren't to go on the other side of because you could get hurt. Somebody might actually hurt you over there. I don't know that my parents taught me that. I just know it was ingrained in me from the time I was a kid. He and I sat down at lunch and he said, I was taught the same thing about going to your side of the street. And I thought, how interesting that somewhere, even when we're little, we begin to be taught to fear the other person. And so I wonder, how do we overcome those fears? And how do our people come not to fear each other, but instead come to embrace one another? What does that look like?
Well, in my context, one of the things that I've learned is that there is this self-preservation effort that we feel that we have to protect our culture. It defines who we are in our past and also involves what's going to be our future in our community. So I think that there is this a great opportunity for us to have conversations, to understand that we can that we are not going to lose our culture, we're not going to lose our tradition, but just for us to be open to understand others, so that we may be able to have a good neighborly experience in our communities.
Yeah, it seems like overcoming fear of the other is in large part about getting to know the other and hearing their stories. We don't have to give up who we are in order to know and appreciate the other. But when I see another person's humanity, I see their love for their children, I see their same fears and common desires and hopes and dreams. I remember we're both human beings. I don't have to be afraid of you because you're different. I actually value you and value those differences.
Yeah.
All right. Real quick, maybe you want to comment on this too. So this is I think is the deeper underlying fear, is that if I get to know someone else, then I will become like them. Right. And lose who I am.
Right.
And I worked so hard on becoming who I am. Right. I mean, like I've whatever. And I don't think I think that's a myth. I think that certainly we can learn from people who are different than us, but just because I encounter somebody who is comes at it from a totally other perspective doesn't mean I'm going to change the core of who I am. I can just simply love them for who they are and be interested in who they are. And maybe and this dynamic doesn't always happen on Facebook because it's just, or social media, just because it just usually spirals into a big argument where everybody's just talking past each other. But in real life, when you're at a hangout or you're at a party or you're at a church potluck, right? God bless the church potluck. I want a potluck right now. When you're having one of those things and you encounter somebody,
7-bean casserole.
Right. We shut down when somebody says something that we don't agree with, or many of us do, not all of us.
Yeah.
And it's okay to just simply be who you are in that moment, letting the other person be who they are. And that's actually how conversation happens, right? Is that back and forth. And it doesn't have to devolve into a fight. It can just be, oh, that's interesting. Here's what I think. Right.
I one of the other things that he was talking about, something that I firmly believe but have problems kind of getting into myself, is I can disagree with your opinion, but I can't disagree with your story, right? Like I can't disagree with the story you tell, and so sometimes I wish that I was a little braver and was able to ask a person in a way to tell me the story about why they feel that way about something.
Right.
Which is a completely different discussion. Like, tell me about your experience with that, whatever it may be. To get to, like, that's a deeper understanding of the person And yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, you can, there's lots of ideas out there, and some of them are good and some of them are bad. But when you finally put it into real practice,
Mhm.
and you hear that story about how it worked, how it didn't work, well, that's real life. I mean, ideas are just ideas, but your experience, which is part of the quadrilateral, I guess quadrilateral is going to be our.
And we're becoming Methodists.
Right, we're becoming Methodists, brought to you by the letter Q. But that real life experience, you can't negate somebody's story. That's how they experienced it. That's what they thought. That's how they came away from it. You can help them process that if you're, amazing pastors like we are.
Of course.
But you can't take that experience away from them.
Right. Well, even, like you and I might be at the sime place, and our story is going to be different.
Of course.
Right. And that doesn't make your story less true than mine. I have a friend who's a great storyteller because he is amazing at making what happened bigger than it was.
Yeah.
And I remember he was telling a story one time about something that he and I had done. And the whole time I was like, that's not what happened. It was so funny because I wanted to correct him because I wanted it to be true.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be factual.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But he was telling the truth of the story, but making it better and funnier.
Right.
But it still got to the truth of of our friendship, really. And that's what the story was, this particular story was about. So even that experience of him telling the story, I just want to be like, no, we didn't wait. But the gist of the facts were right. Anyway.
No, I think this is a good word. Ask people what their story is behind what they think, and you will get to a much more compassionate, loving Christian place.
It's hard though.
It is hard, and it takes time.
Right.
Okay.
Me, it's knowledge. And in seminary, I loved the world religion courses, and we had a semester on Islam. That was so powerful. And I would say it confirmed my beliefs in Christianity after learning about Muslim, because we share so many of the same. I saw it interpreted in their eyes differently. So there's a chapter dedicated to Mary in the Quran. There are Jesus healing stories in the Quran. We all are following the same story of Abraham. And so if we share so many of the same beliefs, if we would just come together and have the conversation, it's beautiful.
All right. Well, this has been a great conversation around how we overcome our fears by finding knowledge, building relationships with people, and I think that's critical for me not being afraid, but instead learning how to practice love. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation today. Well, my guest in this session is Bishop, Professor, Pastor, Mentor, Theologian, Will Willimon. He is a man who needs almost no introduction in the United Methodist Church. He's one of the most influential teachers, preachers, mentors, leaders in the United Methodist Church today. And I also consider him a mentor and a friend. And I really appreciate you being with us today, Bishop Willimon. Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to be part of this, Adam.
Thank you.
Look, they're doing what we're doing.
Right?
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
It is.
We'll listen.
We don't have that fancy seat thing, though, that Adam has. I have no...
I don't know what's going on there. All right.
Yeah, I really appreciated in 2016, you wrote a little book called Fear of the Other. And in that book, you were addressing a lot of the fears that you were seeing in our country at that time. My small group read the book, really appreciated and enjoyed it. And I wanted to ask you, as we're talking about living unafraid with courage and hope, what prompted you to write Fear of the Other?
I think it was the then current presidential nomination process, in which, as many noted, fear played a big role in that. And the candidates on both sides played to many of our fears about immigration, about national security, employment, the economy. In fact, in 2016, xenophobia was declared the word of the year by dictionary.com. And so I guess the specter of watching our political leaders sort of leverage up our fears into votes for them made me think, well, gosh, we need to do some Christian thinking about fear.
Absolutely. So for those who don't remember what xenophobia means, why don't you remind us?
Well, it comes from the Greek word xenos, which appears a lot of times in the New Testament. Xenoi, the xenoi, or others. Xenos is the other. And xenophobia is a big word for fear of the other.
So when you think of the people that folks are afraid of, when we think of fear of the other, the xenos, what are those groups of folks today that we find the greatest fear of? You mentioned a number of them in your book.
Oh, well, I lived through the immigration laws and battle in Alabama. Certainly, a lot of the talk about immigration suggests that this fear, and a lot of things that are said about immigration, like this is taking away American jobs, or we can't sufficiently integrate this many newcomers into our country, or that immigrants are the source of crime. Many of those fears are irrational and suggest, and of course our xenophobia, when applied to immigration, has a long and sort of sad record in America. From time to time it bubbles back up. So that's one fear I thought of. Also thought of fears of people of other races, of other cultures, living in this culture, fears of crime, economic fears.
So if that fear is hardwired in us, that we're a little cautious about the other, they could be a threat to us because they're different from us, how do we overcome that? And what role does our faith play in leading us to do the hard work of overcoming it?
Well, to me, that is the question for us as Christians, because we believe Jesus Christ is able, that he is able to overcome a host of perfectly normal, natural human dispositions, one of them being fear of the other. And this is one thing you can see in the New Testament, and that is, you can imagine the resentment Jews had against Gentiles, who had often persecuted them and put them in bondage, etc. Well, it's just amazing in these early Christian congregations, and you can feel this in 1st and 2nd Corinthians and Romans and all. Paul is dealing with the fact that he says, welcome one another. Welcome these others, these ones that you down through the ages have feared and despised and resented, these others who their people often hurt you. Welcome them as you, the God's enemy, God's feared one, as you have been welcomed in Christ. And it's rather remarkable. And in fact, I go on to say that I think today you look at the Christian congregation and it becomes a kind of witness to the world. Jesus Christ actually makes possible for people to be gathered in intimate, loving relationships and community. People who have very little in common, people from different backgrounds and different races. And the church is sort of God's showcase of what the grace of Christ can do in lives.
That's fantastic. Bishop, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate you, your heart, who you are, and your words have been a source of encouragement to me, and I know to many others. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Adam, for helping all of us live lives unafraid in Christ.
Thank you. The bishop's words made it clear that deep down inside, we are hardwired to be cautious, even afraid of those who are different from ourselves. And we have to overcome that. We have to decide that this is a value, that we're going to overcome that. We have to work at it. We have to build relationships, get to know people, hear their stories. We come to see that they're not so different than we are. And so my hope and prayer is that we might be people who, in relationship with other people, as we look at the issues in our society, as we think about people who are different politically, sociologically, and certainly racially from ourselves, that we might be people who live unafraid, with courage and hope.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, lots of thoughts.
Go for it.
Well, he was talking about fear of the other, about immigration, but we're in a. I mean, that's still out there, but especially as we're closing borders for some good reasons. But I was thinking about the fear that people are experiencing of the other because of the virus, right?
Right.
And you know, I am practicing social distancing. I've not been getting anywhere near people outside of my family, really. That's not. There was this. I was when he was talking, I was thinking of this story. I don't know if you read it, but there was a guy in Maine who the town. There were townsfolk who thought that he had been infected with the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And they cut a tree down to fall across his like driveway,
So
he couldn't leave the house. And I read it, and I was like, "Wow,
right.
you know, what fear can drive us to, you know." And actually, a group from town had, I guess, shown up. I and I'm not great at remembering exactly all of the facts, but they were trying to keep him at home. So that fear that we might have, and then, you know, the stories that we're hearing here in Chautauqua County too, and the fears that people are kind of holding on to of that other, and how they're bringing this thing to us, and so how do we deal with the reality, you know, of the need for social distancing? How do we deal with the reality? And how do we allow that to overcome the fears that we might have about, you know, who is among us, right?
Right. I mean, the social distancing, we talked about this in the last episode. There are some fears that we should never overcome. Like, I don't want to step in front of a bus, and I don't want to get the virus. Like, I don't want anybody to have the virus. And so I am, you know, being cautious, and cautious comes from a form of protective fear. It's hardwired into us to keep us alive. And so that's normal. What would be irrational or takes it too far is when we start persecuting Asian Americans, for example, because somehow they're at fault for this virus, which is, yes, it originated in China, but that doesn't mean that every Asian American is, you know, somehow at fault for this. And so that becomes an irrational fear that then becomes violent in some cases, and that's unnecessary.
Right.
I do think that, and they didn't quite get to this, but clearly the scripture that comes to mind is that love casts out all fear. And I find that interesting, because fear makes me want to stay away from somebody or fight them, right? But love just simply means, well, move toward them, welcome them, even if they are the other. Love is the opposite of that movement. And as we, you know, the question is, how do we Christians overcome fear? Well, we fill our hearts with the love of God, who welcomes everybody, even the worst of people, into this relationship. And that's the amazing thing that Christians and Christianity can offer this world right now.
Well, I was also really taken by Bishop Williman's definition of the church. As God's showcase to what the grace of God can do through Christ, in bringing us together. I love that definition of the church. God's showcase.
God's showcase. Look at these people; they're getting it right. May that be ever more true.
Yeah.
All right. Any last thoughts?
No, you?
No, I'm good. This was fun.
Yep.
So we're gonna say goodbye to our, you know.
Don't forget our drive in worship on Sunday.
The Sunday, Palm Sunday.
Yep. Bring your palms. Bring your communion stuff. And don't forget that we also live stream. So the drive-in is at 10. We live stream at 10:30. So join us for that too. Right?
Sounds good. Yep.
All right.
See ya, everyone. Bye.
Shameless plug.